Good morning. We'll go ahead and get started now. The clock is now 9 a.m. I was actually looking at the bottom clock there, and it was a few minutes ahead. My name is David Ceccarelli. I'm from the State Water Board, the fee section here. Today we're going to discuss the water quality fee stakeholder meeting. Accompanying me to the right is Glenn Osterhage, also part of the fee branch, and to the left is John Russell, the Deputy Director of the Division of Administrative Services. We'll go ahead and just real quick go over a few housekeeping rules. In case of an emergency, alarms will go off, we're asked to go down the stairs and go across the street to the park. Restrooms are out the door to the left, and there's a cafeteria on the bottom floor for those that aren't familiar with the building. This meeting is being webcast, so questions will be sent in, and our staff will, if you have questions, go ahead and send them into the link that's linked to your agenda there, and we'll go ahead and answer those. For those in the room that do have questions, we will have a mic being passed around, so please wait till the mic comes around and have an opportunity to ask those questions. This is our third meeting, generally for our stakeholder process. We've had two prior stakeholder meetings through the budget process with the governor's proposed budget and with the May revised, and now with the budget being enacted. We're going to go over some of these numbers and, of course, the proposals that at this point that staff will be taken to the board for our board meeting in September 17th. Before we go ahead and get more into the details, I'll pass it on to John, and John just go over a few things here with you.
Okay, welcome. Usually at this time of the year in the process, we have things pretty nailed down. It's whatever you see during this meeting is what we'll be proposing to take to the board. This year's a little bit different. We have a few balls up in the air yet. We're not quite as dialed in on a couple things that we want to be, and I won't talk about those right now, but we'll talk about them as we go through the presentation. But I just wanted to give you a heads up that things are a little bit unsettled in a couple of the fee programs. So we'll talk about those in a minute. And then at the end, I know everybody wants to know what is the sort of 5-year look-ahead projection. We'll talk a little bit about that. I don't have that. I've never had that. But I can give you a little bit of an idea of what may be coming up in the next year or so. With that, I'll hand it over to Glenn, and he'll give the presentation.
Good morning. Most of the data we're going to go over today is almost identical. There's a few slight changes to what we've done in either June or March. But if we have, attachment 1 up there, this is the detailed data for each of the programs. Very little has changed here in the enacted budget other than what John indicated. A few things are still being discussed on. For the core programs in here, nothing has changed. We do still have 2 BCPs that were adopted, and we'll get to those in the programs. But for the most part, what we talked about in June is fairly consistent. As we go into each of the programs, we did some conversations this summer with the ag community, with the DSAL community, and we're just starting now to talk with some utility companies related to the water quality certification. So those are the ones we'll talk about as we go along. So I'm not going to go into the detail on attachment 1 unless we have any specific questions. So I'll give people a chance to kind of look at it for a moment here. Anything? So feel free, if you come back to this later on, if you have any questions on the detail here. I just want to spend a lot of time on this one. And along with that, we go to attachment 2. This is very consistent with what we've shown over the past year. The primary driver for the fee increases are the deferrals that we didn't raise over prior years. So looking at the right 3 columns, which is our projection for the 19-20 fiscal year, if you look at that first column of the prior year deferral, so most programs we didn't raise between 6 to 9% for programs. That just carries over. It doesn't mean it goes away when we don't raise fees. Other than the water quality certification program, most programs are in our range. We usually say 3 to 5%. WDR is a little bit higher, but it's consistent on the year-over-year increases. We've previously discussed that land disposal and stormwater are not requiring changes this year due to the revenue being okay for those programs. So although we're going to propose rather large increases, I'm going to focus on the top line WDR of almost 15%. Two-thirds of that, 9%, was prior year deferrals. So again, I'm not going to go much detail on this one. If you have any questions, feel free to jump in on those. Okay, attachment 3, this is where we have all the language looking at different recommendations we're going to take to our board next month. Do want to note that this is based off of current data available. For most programs, I don't expect things to change between now and September, but just in case they do, our final documents will show those. For the WDR program, back in June, we had discussed the winery general order. At the time we were putting these documents together for June, we weren't sure, at least I wasn't, when the winery general order was going to potentially go to our board for adoption. So just in the odd chance it was going to go this fall, we threw a concept, and I do want to say it was just a concept. It wasn't any validated type of fee proposal for the winery community. We've been informed that that general order, I believe, is going to go next June to the board. So we're going to take it out of our proposal this year, not worry about it. We'll continue to work in conjunction with that general order adoption with those fee payers. We did meet with some of the Wine Institute and some other representatives this summer, but we'll take that offline, work separately with that in conjunction with the general order. Don't know if you have anything you want to say on that one. Okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that we did take it off the agenda for this fee adoption meeting, but it will be adopted in about a year. So we do want to start the discussions on the winery, just so there will be a fee, just so there's no surprise. And a year is typically about what we budget time-wise for developing a fee schedule. So it fits in well. So we'll be talking to the individual stakeholders and industry reps on that.
Okay, moving on down the list. As I mentioned before, land disposal, excuse me, no proposed fee changes for that program. The next one down, water quality certification. A lot of people call this the 401 CERT program. That's a program that we've been struggling to make sure we generate enough revenue year over year. They do have a BCP that's called SB 901 that was adopted. This is primarily targeted toward utility companies. So we've said, I think in June and back in March, that it's 1.8 was the amount for the BCP would be recovered from the utility companies. So the other fee payers in that program would not see fee increases directly related to that BCP. Program staff is working to set up a meeting hopefully this week with some of the utility companies in the state that are impacted by this bill to work out a fee structure, whether it's the length of miles, number of projects. So a lot of different ideas that could be used to generate the fee for the 6 to 12 different utility companies that may be impacted by this. So again, it's a large sum of money, but it's going to be targeted just to those companies that have to do the work associated with that bill.
And let me just add, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Glenn, but Glenn just mentioned the 1.8 million, which was in the BCP, but there's also some additional foundational cost, of course, because they'll be picking up some of the foundational programs. So it could be a little more than the $1.8 million.
Yeah, and so the technicalities, it's more like 2.3. So most people here understand our foundational program costs, TMDL, basic planning enforcement, and some others. So every time a BCP comes in play, there's additional costs that we put on the back end because they're going to pick up some of those foundational costs as well. So as we work with utility companies, we're going to toss out two numbers. The BCP is 1.8, but the revenue target is 2.3 because of the costing structure. So again, if you're part of the utility companies, anyone's online, I know there's some emails that went out by program late last week, and hopefully they'll set up a meeting fairly soon to discuss the specific fee for those companies. Moving on, stormwater, as we indicated before, those programs won't need a fee increase. We are going to, as we mentioned before, this is the same discussion point we had previously, was going to put in some language clarification specific to special districts. I'm reading this verbatim here. So located within a city or county that does not oversee stormwater compliance for the district required to pay the fee. So right now, there's a couple of instances, I think, specific to a location down in San Diego. Our language is a little, I'll say ambiguity. There's a little ambiguity in the language that we're not charging them a fee. The language was not meant to do that. So this is just clarifying to make sure that designated entities who's having work done by the water boards are paying a fee. NPDS, again, the general fee payers will require a fee increase. The next bullet point down is what I'm going to generally call the DSAL fee structure. Back in June, it was still fairly early in our process for doing the fee. We had just put out a concept based off of the surface type, which we are now calling option 1. So the surface and subsurface were the two that were discussed. Industry, we've met with them, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, I think, over the summertime. Have offered up option, we now call option 2, which is a volumetric based off the intake. And then option 3 was kind of hybrid between those two. So we've had discussions with that community. It's a very small community right now. Table 2 on the handout shows 4 facilities that would be in line to get a fee related to this work. And it shows what the fees would be for each of the 3 options for those facilities. So the ones that are intake of surface versus subsurface, the intake volume, we have some rather small ones for Pebbly Beach, and then a larger one for Huntington Beach, and what their fees would be. So we're still working on this one. Program, again, is offered up option 1. The regulated community has come back with option 2, so we're still working through that. We'll probably have a separate communication out with those entities separately, and then again, we'll go to the board in September for a recommendation. Just checking to see if we got any emails. Again, if anyone's having any questions, go ahead and let us know. Moving on, confined animals. Again, nothing's really changed since June on this one. They will have a fee increase. We'd indicated before, our fee structure has this language that is preventing us from charging some facilities a fee, even though they have a lot of what I call support stock, if they're regulated as a dairy. So changing our language just a little bit will allow us to have some facilities pay a fee commensurate with the number of support stock they have versus maybe only have 1 or 2 mature milking cows that don't require a fee today. But nothing's changed since June on that one. And then finally, yes, agricultural lands. We've had a number of meetings with the ag community over the summer, talking about different ways of assessing fees. What we show here, there wasn't full agreement with all the fee payers across the state. I would say a rather large majority are in favor of the option we're presenting here. Again, it's not fully agreed upon. There is some concerns with some of the regions today. If I misstate something, my program staff let me know, but the East San Joaquin order requires an integrated nitrogen management plan, INMP. For that, it's a requirement for the state, but some regions don't have it in their orders yet. So there's some concern by one of the groups down south that it's not currently required, but it's required by the state. So they're kind of in between on that. Staff is going to recommend this proposal, which basically states if you can go to your regional board and get an exemption for the INMP requirement, then you'll be subject to the lower fee. But reading through this very quickly, and this is based off of today's fees. If you look at the table in there, I'm going to focus on the group enrollment, not so much on the individual. It's the same logic. But right now, the fee is 95 cents per acre. Under this proposal of changing it, most fee payers would pay 97 cents, so the fee goes up 2 cents per acre. And then those that are exempted from the East San Joaquin order or have the no requirement to apply the additional nitrogen, so that's the California Rice Commission, irrigated pasture, and managed wetlands, would be subject to a lower fee, in this case 78 cents per acre. I do want to note that this is current fee numbers. It doesn't reflect the roughly 12% fee increase we're going to need. Same thing for the individuals. So if you're exempted from certain requirements, we call it the agricultural activity, you'll get a reduced fee. If you're in a region where it's not currently required, you would need to go to that regional water board to get exempted in order to get the reduced fee requirement. And there's some additional language in there as to what's considered a third-party group. There's the language on the East San Joaquin order that's in there. And there's a definition of who's considered Group A, which is everyone except the exempted groups, and then B lists that out. So any questions on that? Oh, we've got to get a microphone.
Thank you. It's Chuck White with Manette Phelps and Phillips representing IED. I'm a little bit concerned that you're basically requiring those entities that don't have any orders yet to go back to the regional board to get some kind of temporary order. Wouldn't it be just simpler, just simply to put it in the regulation here so it's a one-stop shop so that if they haven't adopted IMP, they would be temporarily waived until to pay the higher fee until such time as there actually is an INM. That make it a lot simpler rather than going through a step back to the regional board to go through that whole process, more workload there. Just do it here in these requirements because you have the same result. If the board goes ahead and adopts an IMP, you pay the higher fee. If they don't, then you don't. And it'd be easier to do it here rather than make a multi-step process rather than have it in front of you today.
Okay, and before I see if any program wants to jump in on here, so I think that the process was everyone today pays the same amount. The viewpoint was those that are already exempted from the requirement would get the fee decrease. And then in the future, as other entities or groups got exempted or got the ability to get the reduction, they'd be added at that time. So I don't know, Scott, if you had anything you wanted to add. We're going to put you on the mic, Scott.
You said that correctly.
Oh, thank you. So I know we got your letter, so when we discuss it with our board and when we discuss it at the meeting in September, we will note that there are not full agreement with our recommendation. There are some others that still would prefer a different alternative. That covers going through pretty much the majority of the discussion today. Again, with the exception of providing a little more detail on the ag, fleshing out the desal, and then continuing to work this week on the utility companies for the SB 901, fairly consistent with what we had presented before. Hopefully, we're not going to get any major curveballs thrown at us by the legislature here in the next month or so. And what we'll take to the board in September will be consistent with this. So I'm going to turn it over to John because I know he had a few things he wanted to comment on as well.
So then the last thing that was missing from this whole discussion was cannabis. We are still, that went a little bit political on us, so we're still waiting for some decisions from above. And as soon as we know that, which hopefully will be before the board meeting, we'll let you guys know. But I don't have anything to report right now. We are waiting on some decisions. Bob?
So just to iterate and be redundant and replicative, cannabis fees remain walled off. The rest of us aren't going to wind up absorbing the $13 million gap, right?
That's correct. Right. That's the direction we've got so far. So and the last thing, some of the foundational fees, because the SB 901 is still in play a little bit, the cannabis is still in play a little bit. There might be some fluctuations in the allocation of the foundational fees. So that'll work itself out too. But unfortunately, you're not going to know that until just before the board meeting. And we apologize for that. Typically, we like to get all this squared away so that by this time of the year, like I said before, there aren't any surprises. But we are preparing the board package now as we speak. So we'll get some resolution on all these things and get that out as soon as we can. And so and you do have one more opportunity to review it and then to actually address the board on any issues that may come as an inadvertent surprise on our part.
From Jeff Brousseau at the California Stormwater Quality Association. Attachment 1, stormwater line. It appears the negative number in column M does not mean there will be a discount based on the narrative in attachment 3. If that's a correct interpretation, that seems different than recent years. What is the reasoning behind that change?
Yes, right now, if we go back to, okay, it's on the board here. Column M as in Mary, the two groups, land disposal and stormwater, both show revenue exceeding what we're allocating them as for expenditures. It's a judgment call, and Jeff, you can reach out to me separately. We have done one-year discounts for both of those programs in the past. My dividing line is just a personal number that I use. It can be different. It's about 5%. It needs to be over 5%. It's close enough to zero that we're just going to leave it with no changes. But that's up for discussion. So the other thing we haven't talked about, I'm kind of going offline with Jeff's question here, is we mentioned before our accounting office having converted to the Fiscal statewide database. We still don't have any, well, for the data for the current fiscal year, we have two sets of numbers. We look at labor reports. We only have for the first 3 months of the prior fiscal year, and what we call the allotments, that's all the overhead costs. They're still trying to finish up last July. So normally at this point, we look at our fund reserve to try to get an idea if we'll be able to maybe offset or see how programs are doing. We don't have that luxury this year. I've been looking at some of our forecasted expenditure numbers. I personally just don't feel comfortable enough that it's going to be, how accurate is it going to be? What's my tolerance level? If I'm off in the wrong direction, we could go negative. So it's something I'm struggling with to try to figure out how to estimate something we don't have actual reports for yet. Hopefully our expenditures are going to come in fairly close to some of my projections, and our fund reserve will be okay. But we have to be a little more conservative this year, which is why every program we're going to look to do a full fee increase and then see how things go out next year.
Yeah, that's a good point on Fiscal. I think the board itself has been very transparent about the difficulties we've been having with Fiscal. We, in the accounting branch, we're getting used to the system now. It's a brand new, very complicated system. We're getting more proficient with it, which will improve our processing time a little bit. But the system itself takes about 4 to 5 times long to process things as in our legacy system. And the system itself is not behaving very well as an accounting system should. So we are having difficulties with it. And that will force us, as Glenn just said, to be, I think, a little bit more conservative on some of our projections and both on our revenues and our expenditures. And before, we knew we had some leeway to play with, and we had a greater sense of comfort in the numbers. This year and probably next year, we're going to be pretty conservative in terms of balancing the scales on our behalf, so we don't make an error on our behalf. In the past, we've been the other way, where we try to slant things as much as we can towards the fee payer benefit. When in doubt, we always didn't reduce fees for the benefit of the fee payer, just assuming that we would have the revenue in the reserve to deal with. So anyway, that's just a heads up. Things are going to be a little bit different here while we get used to the new system.
So Jeff, hopefully answer your question. Again, feel free to reach out to me directly to address that more. Anything else, Sarah?
Maybe. Well, we'll see if the meeting goes on. There's a comment from someone from 401, but it's very long, so I'm waiting to hear if they want it read aloud.
So we did spend quite a bit of time with the ag land stakeholders this summer and this year, and also with the confined animal stakeholders, particularly the dairies. We went to 6 or 7 places around the state. So anyway, I want to thank all the stakeholders for engaging with us on that. I know you all spent quite a bit of time on that, helping us to come to resolution on those issues. So, and we appreciate that. Typically, we pick 1 or 2 or 3 topics a year to focus on, where we go out and do this heavy stakeholder engagement. And I think in both of those instances, we came to an agreement that, like Glenn said, it's not completely thumbs up, but it's not completely thumbs down. It's sort of the, thumbs in the middle, I can live with it type of deal. So are there any other questions? And I'll get into the 5-year ahead here in a minute.
Hi, thank you. Andy Rogers with the Russian River Watershed Association of 11 public agencies in the Russian River Watershed defined by the boundary. Appreciate the hearing today and letting me speak. Had a question on the stormwater permit, in particular the MS4. We have a success story that we're very proud of in our region. We formed in 2003, and in 2015, all our phase twos folded under a phase one permit. And so there's a great deal of regional collaboration going on, and we've gotten a lot of benefits out of that, both in cost savings locally and as well as consistent messaging. And then we were awarded a stormwater resource plan grant to, and one of the reasons was the collaboration. So one of the other benefits that's kind of come out of it that we didn't anticipate, but we're glad to report, is that we're really engaged with our regional water board, and the regional water board is able to talk to us in one open forum, as well as the public is able to engage with the local agencies and the regional board around the MS4 permit. And so there's been all these kind of dimensional benefits from this collaboration. So, and I know that that's what the state likes to see, and we're happy to report that there's been a success with that. Our elected officials are very engaged with this, and they constantly ask, well, this is great. We would love to see the state also kind of incentivize this. And particularly if the schools and other non-traditionals are going to be named in the future, we could be a nice foundation to help them get up to speed. We'd like to do that, and it would be great to report that the state is participating in perhaps some sort of incentive program through the fee to keep this going. So we can tell our elected officials everybody's at the table and these are win-wins. So I understand that this is pretty much, close to being wrapped up and all that. So my request, and I guess my question is, can part of the story be that you're hearing these things and there's an opportunity going forward for the board to ask you guys to help us make this a statewide, some sort of incentive program. So when there is regional collaboration, it's recognized by the state in the form of fees, and we'd like to hear that.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. Prior to the board meeting, we'll have some stakeholder or some board member briefings, so we can bring that up to them. And I know we've talked to you in the past. We looked at it from a fee perspective, and we kind of flipped it over to program. We didn't get a lot of traction there, but this may be the program for next year where we go out to various stakeholders. And the issue was, the Russian River is a good example, but we couldn't find any other groups in the state that were interested in this. And we have to have a statewide fee. It's, not to pick on the Rice Commission, but we can't have a fee just for individual groups throughout the state. So maybe we'll reinvigorate that, and we'll talk to you, and we'll talk to Karen and her staff and do a little more intensive work with program. Ideally, in a perfect world, sometimes this doesn't happen, sometimes it does. We rely heavily on program to set the fee structure, and then we, in the DAS, we put the numbers to the actual structure. Sometimes we go out ourselves, like with the oil and gas stakeholders. We're comfortable going out and meeting directly with the stakeholders and come up with a structure ourselves. In other areas, like the recent ag lands discussions, we relied heavily again on program to help us out, come out with a fee structure that makes programmatic sense. We can come up with structures, infinite number of fee structures, but we don't have that programmatic understanding of how it would be beneficial or detrimental to various programs to do this. So, but anyway, I guess short answer, we'd be happy to engage on that issue and bring it forward. And it's probably a good kickoff point if there are any other stakeholder groups that would like us to engage on a similar effort. We'd be happy to take a look at those as well.
Any other questions?
So every year, a few of you say, hey, what's coming down the pipeline? What's coming up? As a fee payer, I need a little bit of predictability to my fees. If I know about a fee coming up, a new fee, if I know about it a year or two ahead, I can build it into my budget, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have that clarity in my crystal ball to be able to do that, but I'll talk a little bit about some things that may be coming up. just as a heads up, the whole budget process, of course, is all confidential, so I can't talk about any BCPs specifically. We are starting the next cycle for the budget. It seems like that's a year-round thing right now. We just finished up or wrapped up last year's or this current year's budget, and the governor is already talking about planning and building the next budget for the future. So a lot of what I'll talk about is things that you've probably read about in the newspaper or that they're already known, but maybe I'll clarify them a little bit. It is a new administration. I was reading an article yesterday that Governor Newsom's priorities and decision-making is distinctly different than Governor Brown's on a number of issues. So that's probably no surprise to anybody. The governor has already outlined several of his priorities. One of the first ones is drinking water, specifically providing adequate drinking water to communities that don't currently have clean drinking water. SB, was it 900? Senator Monning's bill, that just passed. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was alleged BCP of one sort or another to help us implement some of the provisions in that bill. That was one of his priorities. Another one of his priorities is emergency response preparedness. We got a BCP this year for 5 people. I don't anticipate we'll be getting anything more, but that is one of his priorities. I don't know if he has anything in store or not. And that's basically to help public agencies better respond to fires, earthquakes, floods, and help communities out. Thankfully, we haven't had any fires this year, but we've already been out in the field quite a bit for the recent earthquakes in the southern part of the state. Another one of his priorities is housing. That could affect us. He has a goal to increase construction of affordable housing throughout the state. That impacts some of our programs, the 401 CERT program especially. I haven't seen anything specific on that, but that is another priority that could affect us. Those were the big priorities that would have a impact on water board things. Again, I haven't really seen anything concrete on any of those, but I wouldn't be surprised if something like that comes up. The other thing is, again, cannabis. If you review the BCP, the budget change proposal that was approved 3 years ago, we received permanent positions for that program, but only 3-year funding. So it's probably no surprise, or won't come as a surprise to anybody, that we're going to be needing to look at that because we can't support permanent positions with no funding. So I wouldn't be, at all surprised if cannabis again pops up in the governor's budget. And we're not alone in that respect. I think there were 3 or 4 other of the larger state agencies dealing with cannabis that are in the same boat. They got permanent positions but limited term funding. So it's an issue we're going to revisit. And frankly, I think they did that on purpose so that we would have to revisit that program. It was a brand new industry. And just as a kind of a gut check to see if the industry was developing as everybody thought it would. And if not, this is an opportunity for all the agencies to right-size their programs to fit the work. Those are the big ones that I know about. Again, it's a brand new administration. We're getting surprises every day. But those are the ones that I know about that'll potentially affect the water board.
Due to my friends in low places, I'm aware the BCP process has started, and yes, I know you can't talk about it, but specifically and generally at the same time, is there anything we should be aware of already in process or is about to be for next year? I mean, we talked about cannabis, we talked about water quality for DACs. Is there anything else that should generally, programmatically, that logically we could expect without giving anything away?
No, we're very early in the process. We haven't got approval to move ahead with anything yet. This is about the time of year concepts start being generated. The real BCPs start coming together in the fall timeframe for inclusion in the January 9th budget. So we're very early and we don't have any approval to do anything. There was a budget letter that was public as well. In that letter, the kind of the subtext of that was, you know, no new programs, no new program expansion unless, you know, absolutely critical. So that's another kind of, I don't know, clue or hint that we take is, you know, there is some fiscal responsibility in play. And that's the direction to us from the Department of Finance is, you know, don't expand programs or don't add new programs unless absolutely critical. And I can't speak to it right now because I honestly don't know, but there are a lot of bills going through the legislature that could potentially affect the water board. But that just, again, that plays out through the legislative process, and we don't really know how that's going to end up until they finally vote or don't vote on those. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or do we have anything online?
This is from the Riverside County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. It's a little bit long. At Riverside County Flood Control and Water Conservation District, our primary objective is protect life and property from floodwaters. In doing so, we must construct and maintain flood control facilities, and due to the nature of our work, we often work in regulated waters. As such, the topic of increased fees as it relates to implementing the state's water quality programs is of particular interest to the district. Therefore, prior to adoption, the district would like to have a meaningful discussion with the state board regarding fee structure as it relates to public infrastructure projects and maintaining existing facilities. In order to protect life and property, it is critical for the district to maintain our facilities on a regular basis, typically every 1 to 5 years. Maintenance of existing flood control facilities does not involve new construction, and the majority of our facilities were previously authorized under Section 401. Maintenance projects are much less impactful than construction of a new facility and typically only have temporary impacts, if any. Due solely to the size of our facilities, we often pay the maximum 401 fee under the current fee schedule. Since 2010, the maximum 401 fee has increased from $40,000 to $142,100, not including the proposed increase. Therefore, the standard fee schedule is not commensurate to the amount of time and effort needed by regional board staff to process a permit for maintaining existing facilities, and the district would appreciate an opportunity to discuss a more appropriate fee structure as related to existing facilities.
Okay, so we'll take that and we'll get with our program staff. Separately from that, I know our water quality certification 401 CERT program is talking internally about changes to their fee structure going into future fiscal years. I know the flood control discussion has been a topic they've discussed over the last couple of years. So again, we'll take that offline and get with our program staff to hopefully set up a meeting to discuss that in more detail.
Yeah, internally that, like Glenn said, that has been a topic of discussion. It's come up in our San Francisco region as well. Basically, projects involving concrete lined, you know, stormwater conveyance structures.
Do we have any other questions? So basically next steps, staff is in the, preparing for a item to take to the board. Water quality fees will be taken to the board on September 17th. It's a Tuesday. Also in line with our water rights and our drinking water fees. 10 days prior to that, on the 7th or around that time, our staff report will be mailed out and sent out on a LIRIS list and through the water board processes. So each of you will have an opportunity to see staff's proposals and recommendations and have an opportunity to comment. There'll be a comment period, of course, once the staff report is issued and made public. Any other questions?
So I say this every single meeting, but we'd be happy to talk to you if you do have questions. The email or telephone call, you can contact any one of us, and we'd be happy to talk to you individually or as a group. We are down to the wire in terms of the adoption, but that doesn't preclude us, having additional discussions with any of you on anything that you want to talk about related to fees.
I just want to add, today at 1 o'clock, there will be a water rights fee stakeholder meeting. And then on Wednesday, August 7th, we'll be also hosting a stakeholder meeting for our drinking water programs.
All right. Well, thank you for spending a few minutes of your day with us.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.